She stood at the edge of the rooftop where the city ended and the sky refused to begin. The wind pressed against her skin like it wanted to remember her. Behind her, windows flickered with the soft pulse of ordinary life. But ahead, above, there was nothing ordinary at all, just silence filled with light. A sky too crowded with stars to feel honest. She looked up, and for a moment it looked back. Not with eyes, but with a kind of waiting. As if the entire night had been holding its breath for this one gaze to happen. Somewhere far beyond what her pupils could drink in was a boundary. A perfect, round silence. The edge of everything we will ever see. Not the edge of the universe. No, just the edge of our light. That invisible shell where photons give up and space stops being visible. The observable universe. A phrase too clean to mean what it really means. A prison made of light, where every wall is made of time. NNTHE stars she saw weren't stars. They were stories, memories written in photons, launched across billions of years. Some from galaxies already dead, others from places so far we'll never reach them, only receive the echo. Every shimmer above her was a ghost. The night sky, a glowing graveyard, and yet it felt so alive. That's the cruelty of light. It tells you something is there, but it never says when. NNSHE reached into her coat, pulled out an old analog viewfinder, not for nostalgia, but for distance. She lifted it to her eyes, clicked once. A single frame, captured in film, the stars bleeding into each other like nervous veins. The photo would never show her what she saw, just what had arrived. And that, always, is too late. What if this moment, this rooftop, this exact breath, was already recorded in the sky? What if one day a civilization on the other side of the visible sphere will look in this direction and see her? Not as she is, but as she was, right now, in this second. Because that's how time works here. Light is not just a messenger. It's a delay. A wall made of past tense. The faster we chase it, the more we fall behind. They say the observable universe is 93 billion light-years wide, but they say it like it's a number, not a wound, not a betrayal, not a mirror that can only show you what's already been lost. She lowered the viewfinder, her eyes adjusted to the darkness, not because it got darker, but because her mind stopped expecting to see forward, only backward, only into the depths of delay. And then, SHE took one breath, the kind that feels like a choice. And for the first time, she understood something no telescope could teach. That distance isn't space. It's memory. And maybe, just maybe, the bigger the universe seems, the lonelier we actually are. Not because it's empty, but because it's full of light that will never touch us. NNTHE rooftop creaked. The sky didn't blink, and the girl stood still, not in awe, but in alignment, not with the stars, but with their silence. They say the universe is expanding, but they never say what that feels like. They don't tell you how it hums at the edge of perception, not as motion, but as a constant widening of silence. You don't feel it in your bones, you feel it in your doubt. The kind that starts when you stare too long at something still. A wall. A night sky. A girl's face when she hears a sound no one else notices. NNTHAT night. The girl stood in a museum, not a real one, just a hollow planetarium long since turned off. No stars projected. Just the vast black dome, empty and unfinished. Her breath bounced against the walls like sonar. She walked to the center, her boots tapping softly against the floor. And then she lay down, arms stretched wide, as if trying to measure the sky by how much of her it could hold. What is the edge of what we can see? That's the wrong question. The real question is, why is there an edge at all? Why do we talk about observable like it's a limitation of the cosmos and not a scar of our design? The boundary isn't where the universe ends. It's where our ability to witness breaks down, where time and space stretch so far that light never arrives. Not because it doesn't want to, but because it simply can't. Look up. Choose a star. The light from that star may have traveled 10,000 years, 100,000, maybe more. That means what you're seeing is a photograph, printed in photons, carried through vacuum, uninterrupted by time. But it's not the star, it's its absence, its echo. You're not observing an object, you're remembering it. NNSHE raised her hand to the dome above her. It looked like a void, but her mind filled it with galaxies, nebulae, cosmic webs. She'd memorized their names, their redshifts, their speculative shapes. But that night, none of it mattered. The scale wasn't numbers anymore. It was grief. Because once you realize the limit isn't out there, it's in here, something changes. You stop asking how big. You start asking how alone. When scientists say the observable universe, they mean the volume of space from which light has had time to reach us since the Big Bang. That's the technical phrasing. But behind that clinical precision is a darker truth. You are at the center of a bubble that no one else shares. Every observer has their own sphere, every consciousness, a unique map of visibility. And that means the edge is personal, not universal. It means your cosmos isn't mine. Her cosmos isn't yours. The universe is not one. It is a patchwork of overlapping memories. NNSHE closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she imagined the boundary as a frozen ocean of light, stretching 46 billion light-years in every direction. But that number was a trap, because the universe is only 13.8 billion years old. So how can we see farther than that? The answer twists the gut. Space itself has been stretching, dragging photons like spider silk across an inflating balloon. The light we see now was born closer, but the space between us has grown, like breath held too long. NNSHE opened her eyes again, and for the first time, she didn't see the dome as black. She saw it as waiting, a kind of paused arrival, as if the stars weren't missing, just late. And maybe that's the truth of all perception. We're not just looking into space. We're listening for arrivals that may never come. NNWE don't see the present. We receive the past. Every image is a time capsule. Every glimpse is a delay. And so the question isn't, how big is the observable universe? The question is, how much past can a single mind hold before it breaks? NNTHE girl stood up slowly. The floor groaned beneath her, echoing through the planetarium like a soft crack in the fabric of knowing. She touched her wrist, felt her pulse. A biological clock, measuring seconds in contrast to billions of years. The absurdity made her smile. Then her eyes shifted, not to the ceiling, but inward, toward a growing awareness that perhaps we were never meant to comprehend this, only to carry it. Like weight, like distance, like silence too vast to name, because maybe the universe isn't growing. Maybe we're shrinking into more refined observers, into tighter centers of personal horizon. And maybe that's what it means to be human inside an expanding cosmos, to feel the sky stretch further with every breath you take, and to know that none of it will ever return your gaze. The thing about numbers is, they don't hit you in the chest. You can say 100 billion galaxies, or 93 billion light-years wide, and the brain will nod politely, but the body feels nothing. It's not until you realize that every second the universe expands faster than the speed of light that something flickers. Because that's not a number, that's a betrayal of intuition. It means there are places right now receding from us so fast that their light will never arrive. Not in a trillion years. Not ever. Their existence is not denied, but unreachable. Not because they're gone, but because they're too far to ever be seen. In the observatory above the cliffs, the girl walked slowly past the last working lens. The dome creaked in the wind like an old hull at sea. One telescope still pointed outward, motionless, locked onto a sector of sky so remote it had no name, just coordinates, a grid reference in a silence so deep it made sound feel fictional. She touched the cold metal casing, not as a scientist, as a witness, because that's what this place had become, a cathedral for the unfinished, where seeing had been replaced by waiting. Here's a truth most don't say aloud. The cosmic microwave background, the oldest light we've ever received, is not some crisp image. It's radiation, stretched and cooled over 13.8 billion years. arriving like the distant hum of a dying symphony. We're not looking at a wall of stars. We're looking at the ashes of the beginning, still warm, still moving. And beyond that, we know nothing. Not metaphorically, literally nothing. And yet, it moves. The universe grows like breath in reverse. Not because it's going somewhere, but because space itself is making room. Between everything. It's not expansion like a balloon. It's more like a fabric unraveling itself from within, a glacier of silence growing outward through time. NNSHE stepped outside the dome into the cold. Night had fallen harder now. The horizon barely separated sky from ground. The telescope behind her stayed locked, forever aimed at something it would never touch. She looked up, not seeking an answer. Just contact. And that's when she remembered the number that finally made her feel something. Every second, 17 million billion neutrinos pass through your body. Invisible. Indifferent. Some of them born in the heart of the sun, others from the Big Bang itself. Ancient passengers. Never touching. Just moving through. And that's what the universe is. Not a structure. A flow. And not even of matter, but of moments. Things that have already happened, now brushing against us, long after their cause has died. The light from a dying star. The echo of a formation wave. The push of an expansion that no longer needs force. The cosmos is not made of galaxies. It's made of messages. Delayed. Distorted. Delivered by light and ghosts. Inside her pocket, she found a folded note. It wasn't hers. Not really. She'd written it weeks ago in a different city, in a different version of herself. Just one sentence. What I see is already gone. She didn't cry, but the cold felt sharper after reading it. Because when we speak of the observable universe, we forget what observable really implies. It's not a map of the known. It's a funeral of what once was. A light show from a theater that burned down long before we were born. The further you look, the more you're not seeing what is, but what was. That means the edge isn't just about distance. It's about the maximum amount of delay reality allows. Beyond that, we may still exist, but not as knowers. NNSHE took a deep breath. Not for calm, for orientation. Because when nothing can be seen, breath is the only reference left. And that's when it hit. The universe is not just large, it's asynchronous. Its parts do not align. Its truths do not synchronize. It isn't one thing. It's many, stitched together by delay and incompletion. And back inside, she stood before the old star charts, ink-faded galaxies marked with careful hands. But now they look like error maps. Beautiful, precise, and painfully obsolete. Because now she knew. The more accurate our models become, the more distant they drift from the moment we actually live in. Every new telescope is a time machine aimed away from presence. Every deeper look is a trade. Clarity for immediacy. NNSO, maybe that's the true shape of the observable universe. Not a sphere, but a shell. Hollow, resonant, infinite in what it excludes. And maybe we're not inside it. Maybe we are it. Each consciousness, a center point of perception, holding a different fragment of light. Alone. Together. In the glow of an arrival that will never complete, there's a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when the question stops being what is the universe and becomes what is this illusion of seeing it. That moment doesn't come from science. It comes from silence. The kind that seeps in when the models stop aligning, and the numbers become too clean. The girl felt it first not in the observatory, but in a train station, late at night, where no train ever came. She sat on a bench, watching the arrivals board flicker. The screen glitched once, then again. The word delayed appeared beside every destination. And something in her knew. So is light, NNFOR. Most of our lives, we believe the universe is external, that it's out there, and we're just passengers inside it. But what if that's wrong? What if the observable universe is not a landscape, but a construct, a simulation of visibility limited by the architecture of perception? We call it observable, as if that's a passive state. But observation isn't passive. It's selective. You never see the whole. You see what gets through. And outside the station, the streets were empty. A light rain made the concrete shimmer. She looked into a puddle, not for herself, but for something else. The reflection was clean. Too clean. No distortion. no ripple. And in that moment, it felt less like a puddle and more like a portal, a thin membrane between now and never. What if the universe we see is shaped by filtering, not unfolding? We know about cosmic inflation, how the early universe expanded faster than light in the first sliver of time. But what if that speed didn't just stretch space? What if it buried parts of the cosmos we'll never access? Not just far, but fundamentally invisible. Zones of reality permanently inaccessible, locked beyond our causal horizon. That would mean parts of the universe exist that no being, no technology, no God could ever touch. Not because they're gone, but because they're elsewhere in time. An NTHE girl touched the puddle's edge. A leaf floated in the center, unmoving, but its reflection drifted. She followed the movement with her eyes. It didn't make sense. It wasn't the leaf that was moving. It was the light trying to remember where the leaf had been. For the first time, she felt it in her bones. We're not seeing objects. We're seeing persistence. And this is the pivot, the fracture line. The place where the comfortable idea of expansion becomes a deeper discomfort. Because if some parts of the universe are forever cut off, not by space but by causal limits, then reality is not whole. It is fractured, fragmented by velocity and isolation. And that means there is no one universe. There are as many universes as there are points of observation. At a conference once, someone asked, "What's outside the observable universe?" The physicist smiled and said, "That's like asking what's beyond the page you're reading." But maybe the better metaphor is darker. Maybe it's like asking what's beyond the camera in a film. It's not nothing, but it doesn't belong to the story. And back in her apartment, the girl turned off every light. The window looked out on the city, glowing like neurons in a dying dream. She sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a small flashlight in her palm. She turned it on, then off, then on. Each pulse a burst of clarity, but only while it lasted. The room, for a second, became definable. Then it slipped back into ambiguity. Maybe the universe is like that. Not steady, but flickering. Legible only when something shines, and even then, only in part. NSHE blinked, and the afterimage stayed too long. A soft burn on her retina, and suddenly she wondered, what if that's all we ever see? The afterimage of being. Light delayed, shadows misfiled, coordinates out of sync in. In physics, they call it the cosmic event horizon, the distance beyond which events can never affect us. It's not just out there. It's here, too, in our lives. In the things we missed. In the messages we never received because they were moving too fast away from us. The person you almost became. The love that passed before you arrived. The ideas that dissolved before they could reach you. NTHE girl closed her eyes. And instead of darkness, she saw the slow drift of galaxies like lanterns underwater. Not because they were real, but because somewhere, once, light left them. And that light is still traveling, still trying to find her. And maybe that's what the observable universe really is. Not a map, a longing, a delay so vast it became beautiful, and terrifying, and human. Some truths don't arrive through thought, they arrive through skin. Through the moment, a room goes too quiet. Through the weight of an object you forgot was in your hand. Through the tremble of a girl's fingers when she touches glass that shouldn't be warm, but is. That night she pressed her palm against the window, not to see out, but to feel through. The city blinked below her like an artificial sky, pixelated and indifferent. But the glass held heat, a leftover breath from the sun, hours old. The past, warming the now Gidden. This is what the universe does. It leaves temperature, a whisper of origin that never fully fades. The entire cosmos, even in its coldest corners, still holds on to the heat of its birth. 2.7 Kelvin. That's what's left. A soft, invisible warmth, like the body heat of a ghost you never knew. NNSHE turned from the window and walked barefoot across the floor. Every step echoed. Not loudly, but with detail. And, for the first time, the floor didn't feel like a surface. It felt like a recording. A memory of motion. Like time wasn't just something she passed through, but something that recorded her, moment by moment, breath by breath, into the fabric of reality. Maybe that's what light does too. Maybe that's why it takes so long to arrive. Because it's not just moving, it's inscribing. And in the heart of every galaxy there's a black hole. Not always destructive. Sometimes quiet, patient, still. And these singularities, they don't just pull, they store. They fold space like fabric, hold time like breath. There are places we've seen, galaxies we've mapped, where the light curves not around gravity, but into it. Warped, rewired, rewritten. That means what we see isn't where it is, and what we feel isn't where we are. It's all been pulled, bent, softly rewritten by the hands of mass. NNSHE lay down on the cold floor and stared at the ceiling, which was just drywall, but could have been sky. Her fingertips grazed the hardwood, each fiber a fossil, a tree once alive, now flattened and stilled, yet still transmitting. She felt the line blur between object and origin, between sensation and signal. Maybe that's what the observable universe is, not just what we see, but what still radiates. Because observation isn't just vision, it's contact, microwave background, redshift, gravitational lensing, each one not a picture, but a bruise. The cosmos has been struck, not by violence, but by time. And those impacts leave traces. Warmth, curve, delay. It's not that we see galaxies. We see where they were, what they did to the space around them, and how their motion left signatures on the light they gave. An NTHE girl stood up slowly. Her body felt heavier, not from fatigue, from scale, because to walk across a room while knowing you're inside a fragment of time is not normal. It changes your posture, your weight, your breath. She stepped toward the mirror, looked in, not to find herself, but to search for evidence. There's something called gravitational time dilation. When you're near a strong gravitational field, a planet, a star, a black hole, time slows down. Not metaphorically, literally. Your seconds stretch, your aging lags. So in a very real way, where you are affects how you are. And if that's true on the edges of a neutron star, maybe it's true here too. Maybe the reason some nights feel longer isn't psychological. Maybe your location in the cosmos pulls slightly harder. Maybe time is never flat, only folded, pressed, tensed. NNSHE touched her chest, felt the slow rhythm of her heart, a metronome against an asymmetric clock. If time bends and space expands and light delays, then what is this body here now doing? And the answer came not in thought, but in sensation. Witnessing. That's all. The skin, the breath, the ears, they don't exist to act. They exist to record, to absorb arrival, and out the window, a plane moved soundlessly. Just one red light blinking across the black. But that light was already delayed, and the blink was already old. Even here, even now, even within Earth's atmosphere, there is no true simultaneity. There is no clean now. Every experience is a smear, a stretch between source and reception. And yet, we move through it with faith. Faith that what we feel is real, even if it's already gone. NNTHE girl turned off the lights. Let the room become space, not metaphorically, but experientially. A volume of darkness, with small interruptions of meaning. She didn't need stars. She needed only the hum. That low, almost imperceptible sensation of stillness that isn't absence, but arrival slowed beyond recognition. And maybe that's all perception ever is. Not the truth, but the residue of it. Not the universe, but the touch it left behind. There are nights when the numbers come too close, not as data, but as reflections. The girl sat at her desk, surrounded by books, maps, and old star charts folded so many times their creases had become permanent. She wasn't studying. She was searching. Not for truth, but for recognition. For a moment when something in the cosmos looked back and said, "Yes, this is also you." NNSHE stared at an image printed in false color, the deep field scan from a space telescope. Each dot, a galaxy, tens of thousands, layered into a single frame. It looked like noise at first, random. But the longer she looked, the more it resembled something else. A scar. A soft wound of light, stretching backward through time. Not outward, backward. An N, because that's what the observable universe really is. A personal archive of everything that reached you. No two people carry the same one. No two maps match. Because where you are, when you are, how fast you move, what gravity you rest in, they all shape the image. The universe isn't a shared experience. It's a personal recording. Like memory, NNSHE touched her temple. Not to think, but to feel. There's a theory in quantum cosmology that the act of observation helps define the boundaries of the system. Not in a mystical way, but mechanically. The information that reaches you, that interacts with you, becomes real for you. And in that sense, your brain is not inside the universe. The observable universe is inside your brain. NNTHE numbers prove nothing, but they haunt. 13.8 billion years since the Big Bang. 93 billion light-years across. 100 billion galaxies. 100 billion stars in each. These aren't facts. They're mirrors. The moment you hear them, they don't stay distant. They enter your skin, echo through your chest, hollow you out like cathedral bells that never fully stop ringing. NNSHE stood, moved to the window again. Her reflection met her halfway, eyes tired, mouth still. Behind her, the books flickered softly in the city light. And she thought, maybe the reason we can't comprehend the scale of the universe isn't because it's too big, but because it's too much like us. Full of signals no one hears, full of departures no one witnessed, full of silence that isn't empty, but overflowing. When the James Webb Telescope captured the most detailed infrared image of the early universe, it didn't just show galaxies. It showed age. Some of those shapes were so far away that the light had been stretched into red, then into heat. What once was a star now arrived as a temperature profile. A warmth, displaced, and in that image, she saw herself. Not literally, but fundamentally. A creature made of past arrivals, of time stretched, of light forgotten. NNHER fingertips hovered over the glass. No contact this time. Just distance, just allowance. Sometimes we need not to touch, but to feel that we could. That's all the universe gives us anyway. Not access, not contact, just signals. Just permission to imagine a closeness that physics refuses to provide. And then something shifted. Not outside. Inside. A realization, a collapse of questions. It wasn't about size anymore. Not about how far, or how old, or how fast. The true question was, what do we do with this distance? Because if the observable universe is a limit, then so is the self. So is the body. So is the past. And maybe the only response to these limits is not understanding, but communion. NNSHE turned from the window. The room no longer felt like a room. It felt like a vessel, the kind that carries light, and memories, and delay. Her heartbeat, steady now, timed itself against a rhythm she couldn't hear, but could somehow sense, a pulse from beyond the edge. Not metaphorical, bodily. The body doesn't need to comprehend. It only needs to receive. NNSO, she sat. Closed her eyes. Let the numbers return. 46.5 billion light-years in one direction. 13.8 billion years of time. Neutrinos from stars she never saw. Photons from explosions she'll never learn the names of. Every heartbeat, a translation of cosmic events into presence. That's what perception is. Not seeing, but letting through. And maybe, just maybe, the observable universe was never about measuring the cosmos. Maybe it was always about calibrating the soul, aligning the inner eye to a geometry so vast, so precise, so indifferent, that it made emotion feel sacred again. Because when you stand beneath the stars, when you understand that every point of light is an ancient arrival from a source that may no longer exist, you begin to feel it, not with the mind, but with the whole weight of being alive. NNTHE girl opened her eyes. Nothing had changed. But everything was different. She was no longer trying to reach the edge. She had become it. The sky was still there in the morning, pale, diffused, emptied of stars, but not of meaning. The girl walked alone through the park before sunrise, her breath visible, her pace slow, as if time itself had thickened. The world was waking, but gently, uncertainly, as though afraid to disturb something ancient still unfolding beneath the surface. She looked up not for answers anymore, but for resonance. The stars were gone, hidden behind daylight. Yet their light, billions of years in transit, continued to arrive, brushing the atmosphere, filtering invisibly through blue. And then it came, the final image. The one that didn't need words. Just a presence. A girl stands in a field of satellite dishes, miles of metal arms stretching toward the sky, frozen mid-listen. She doesn't move. Just breathes. The cameras don't pan, the light doesn't change. But something deep inside the frame fractures, softly, like silence being pierced by a thought. It's not that she sees the edge of the observable universe. It's that she knows she never will. And that knowledge doesn't break her. It remakes her in. Because maybe the most profound truth is the simplest. The observable universe is not a limit of light, but a limit of return. What has reached us stays. What hasn't, won't. And in between, we live on the edge of the known, suspended between message and absence, echo and silence. To be human is to stand exactly there. NNSHE knelt in the grass. Let her fingers graze the frost. One scientific model describes the expansion of the universe as not just linear or exponential, but accelerating, driven by dark energy, a force we barely understand. This means the further something is from you, the faster it moves away. Eventually, everything recedes. Everything. One day, galaxies we now see will vanish from the sky, not because they stopped shining, but because their light will never arrive again. The cosmos is not disappearing. It's withdrawing, and still, we build telescopes, we listen to static, we name stars after myths, and send golden records into space. Not to conquer the void, but to say we were here. And maybe that's the final function of the observable universe. Not to define the boundaries of space, but to reflect the outline of our reach. She stood up again, hands in her pockets. In her palm, a folded piece of paper. Same one as before, same words. But now they felt heavier. What I see is already gone. She let the note fall to the wind, watched it drift, caught in air that had traveled across continents. Air older than cities. Air that had once passed through lungs of those who also looked up. End. N. Because maybe this isn't about the universe at all. Maybe this is about proximity to absence. About how we live in a world where everything we see is already retreating. People, moments, suns. And yet we love, we build, we witness. That is not naivete, that is courage. NNSHE returned home just as the sun crested the skyline. The light was warm, but now she knew its age, 8 minutes and 20 seconds. The sunlight that kissed her face was not now, it was then. Even here, even in this intimate nearness, delay ruled everything. But instead of fear, she felt something new, something like peace. Because, what if this isn't a tragedy? What if it's the point? What if the universe isn't meant to be seen all at once, but in fragments, in echoes, in incomplete transmissions that force us to imagine the rest? What if that limitation is the source of meaning, of art, of science, of empathy. What if the edge of the observable universe is not where knowing ends, but where wonder begins? And what if, just what if, this whole design, this cosmic delay, this endless stretch of ancient light, is not a flaw of distance, but a structure of connection, a rhythm of approach and withdrawal that mimics breath? That teaches us to listen, to wait, to care for what we'll never reach. Nen She sat at her desk again, no star maps now. Just the quiet hum of morning. She touched the surface of the wood, remembered the grain, the weight, the origin. Everything here had traveled. Even the chair. Even her hands. Even thought. And outside, the street filled slowly with people who would never ask how big the observable universe is. But every one of them moved through light that had taken billions of years to arrive. Every one of them lit by messages from what no longer exists, and in that, there was grace. And Nen, because maybe the universe is not there to answer us. And Nen, maybe it's there to receive the questions. What if the cosmos expands faster than our ability to feel it, and yet we still try? What if the stars aren't our ancestors, but our consequences? What if the observable universe is not a boundary, but a mirror held at the speed of loss? Nshe closed her eyes, and this time, the darkness wasn't empty. It was full of arrivals, nexes, close in here.